Okay, so today I'm going to confess that I still have a lot of things to learn when it comes to fly fishing. So I'm going to tell you a small anecdote from this year's fishing trip to the Swedish mountains. And the spring was very late this year, so we came up to the mountains when it was still very high water and very cold water. Still lots of melting water coming from ice higher up in the mountains. So naturally we didn't have any hatches or any insects activity whatsoever, and I was fishing with a friend who is a salmon and pike fisherman, and he was, despite this, catching a lot of fish on a very modest looking fly that you see in front of me, which in Finnish is called Tinseli. It's basically made out of just tinsel, and it's a particular kind, flashaboo, and this is like an extra limp version, so it's like marabou in the water, and it's very lively in the water. And I have a couple of theories why this fly worked so well for him. I was trying essentially also do streamer fishing with more natural looking streamers, and it was hard for me to admit that actually this very simple fly was catching a lot more fish than mine was. And there's a few reasons for this, I think. One of them was that his presentations in the water were probably a lot better because the simple fact that he could see the fly in the water. So he could, all his mending and upstream and downstream mending to get the fly to behave the way he liked worked much better when he could actually see the fly. So he could hang these flies behind stones where he predicted that trout would be holding in. Whereas I was just guessing when I was trying to present my flies. The other thing is that I do think that this flashy appearance, this bling, is a very strong trigger for most predatory fish, including trout. And it's hard for me to admit that because this doesn't really imitate, well, it doesn't look like it imitates anything, but it is a strong trigger for trout, especially, which was hard for me to admit after this trip. But the other thing is that this material, it's very sparsely dressed. It lives really nicely in the water, and as I said, this material is very limp. You can see how easily it moves when I blow a little bit. The other thing is that it doesn't hold a lot of water when you're casting it. So this one is actually unweighted. So if you're fishing with a sinking line, this will have a very nice presentation in still water or in slow moving pools. And if you wanted to get it further down, there's a trick we learned. So we start with basically with unweighted flies, but then we add tungsten beads to it using this little trick I'm going to show you to you now. And essentially you start by having a loop on your tippet material, and these hooks are have a large eye, which means that you can easily thread the loop through. And what you then do, and so you start from the point of the hook and go up, and then you take this loop. What you can do is that you can take this tungsten bead, whatever size you prefer, and actually these they're quite easy to get the loop through because the one side of the bead has a larger opening, and then you thread the whole fly through the loop. The larger the loop, the easier this will be. Okay, and now you essentially have the fly upside down, and you will put this loop just behind the eye of the hook with the bead like that. And what you can see now is that you have created a jig hook where you can actually change the weight of the fly depending on how deep you want to go. Obviously, the bigger the bead, the more difficult this one will be to cast, so you don't want to have too big beads, just the right size for the task at hand. And because this flashable material is very light, you don't actually need that much weight for this fly to dive very quickly. Okay, so it will be easier if you have a slightly longer loop to get it all the way around the fly. But the main thing is that it will behave as a jig hook, and you can change the weight of the fly. Now I'm going to show how to tie this fly. So I'm using, well, you can use a lot of different hooks, but I'm quite fond of this OPST. It's like a stinger hook. It's very thick wire, which is nice if you're actually catching big fish as well. Also, it has this big eye, so you can easily thread the loop through the eye. So I'm just gonna I'm using, usually for these flies, I'm using gel spun thread. It's a lot stronger than normal thread. It's more expensive, but your flies will be a lot more durable. And this is essentially a very, very easy fly to tie. So I have prepared some tinsel flash here. So you take the first bunch, and I usually start by having a shorter ends of the flash first, and then this part here will be longer, as you can see. So I get lots of different lengths of these fibers, and I've already spread them out so that I have a mix of different lengths in this bundle. And after 3 firm wraps, I just fold it over and I tie it in, and as you can see, that will be a very durable tail for this fly. And then I just go in the middle of the fly, and I have prepared another bunch of tinsel, and this one is a little bit shorter, also a mix of different lengths. I will go 2 loose wraps around, make sure that these fibers are all around the hook, and then another wrap, and then I'll just fold these back like this, and I will just tie a small bump behind this like that, and then I can go all the way to the eye of the hook, and I have a third bundle prepared here, and I will do the same thing. I will have 2 loose wraps, around, and then I will make sure that everything is evenly spread around the hook, and then tighten it, another wrap, and then fold these back over. And that is your fly. That's the easiest and fastest way. And then, because it's unweighted, you can use the trick I just taught you, how to make this into a jig hook, or you can use it unweighted as well if you have a sinking line and you're fishing in slow water. And I can tell you, promise this, that this is, I mean, I usually fish several flies on the seine when I'm casting like this, and I have tried using both these like more natural looking, realistic, at least to human eye, more realistic looking flies. It essentially always takes this very simple to tie flashable marabous. And if you want to have a smaller one, you can just take your scissors and trim this down to a smaller size in the field. So it's a very versatile fly, and I basically now have a full box of these. And this would be my go-to streamer in most situations. Okay, so and in particular for competition fishing, I think this is one trick that you have to have up your sleeve. And so hope that was informative. Thanks for watching.